The first time the mountain sang, Mara Elridge tried to warn them. They called her unstable. They called it a shock. They called it anything but the truth. 3 winters later, the same song returns, thinner, clearer, more certain, and the one man who once made her feel like a mistake shows up at her door with a contract in his hand. A Luna contract. A title without a home. A promise that doesn't include being chosen. And when the snow starts collecting bodies like ornaments, the alpha who never wanted her is the one who needs her to listen. Northwatch Ridge looked like a postcard that had learned to lie. Christmas lights blinked along the rooftops. A towering pine glittered in the town square, wrapped in color, crowned with a star, bright enough to make the falling snow look harmless. But the storm that night didn't feel like weather. It felt like something closing in. Mara hit the square at a run, boots slipping on powder that shouldn't have been that thick, that fast. People were already gathering, their voices muffled by wind, tourists in puffy coats, locals with tight mouths, faces turned upward like the mountain might explain itself. Then the scream came again. Not a playful shriek. Not drunken laughter. A sound with edges, raw and ruined, like someone was being pulled apart from the inside. Mara pushed through the crowd and saw her. A young woman on her knees in the snow beneath the glowing tree, fingers clawing at the ground like it could open and swallow her whole. Frost clung to her lashes. Her lips had gone pale blue. And as Mara knelt, the girl's eyes met hers, wide, pleading, trapped in a kind of terror Mara couldn't name yet. That's when Mara heard it. A melody, thin as wire, aching as a bruise, threading through the wind from the dark line of pines beyond the town. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just certain. As if the mountain had been waiting for someone to notice. The girl tried to speak, but her breath crystallized before it left her mouth. Ice crawled up her skin in delicate patterns, beautiful in the way a trap is beautiful. The crowd shouted questions. Someone yelled to call the police. Someone else swore it was hypothermia. Mara didn't scream. She froze, because she understood the worst part immediately. This wasn't happening to the girl. It was happening through her, like she'd been touched by something that didn't know its own strength. The authorities arrived fast. So did the pack, quietly, efficiently, the way predators move when they don't want anyone to notice they're coordinating. Mara tried to talk. I tried to explain the song. The frost patterns. The way the air changed when the melody drifted closer. She pointed toward the tree lean, begging someone, anyone, to listen. They didn't. The official story formed in real time around her: hysteria, panic, trauma response. A tragic holiday accident. The girl became missing. The ice became weather. And Mara became the easiest thing of all to dismiss, a human who saw too much. She went home that night with snow in her hair and the melody lodged behind her ribs, repeating like a curse. She told herself she'd prove it. She told herself she'd make them believe her. But truth doesn't survive in a town that profits from pretending it's safe. 3 years passed. Northwatch Ridge recovered just enough to smile for tourists again, until the disappearances started returning, one by one, as if something ancient had finally remembered the way down from the peaks. And then, on the first night, Mara heard the song again, clear enough to make her stomach drop. There was a knock at her door. When she opened it, Cale Arden stood on her steps like a shadow given a uniform, controlled, unreadable, snow collecting on his shoulders as if it respected him. He didn't apologize for the past. He didn't pretend he'd come because he missed her. He held out a folder, crisp and official, stamped with pack authority. "Sign," he said, voice low, eyes steady. "You'll be Luna, on paper." Mara's fingers tightened around the doorframe. Because she could hear the mountains singing, even from here. Because she knew what the song did to people. And because she understood, with a clarity that tasted like iron, that this wasn't an invitation. It was a transaction. And somehow, it was still the closest thing to being asked that Mara had ever been. Subscribe now so you're here for every turn this story takes. But to understand why she didn't slam the door in his face, why she took the pen with hands that still remembered frost, you have to go back to the night the town decided Mara Elridge was lying. The storm began as a kindness. Soft flakes drifting down like quiet applause, dressing the rooftops and pine branches in clean white. The kind of snow tourists paid for, photographed, laughed in, carried inside on scarves. Then the air changed. Not colder at first, sharper. As if the wind had teeth. Mara stood at the edge of the town square with her coat pulled tight and her breath coming fast, watching the lights blink on the Christmas tree. The star at the top threw a pale glow over the crowd. Families lingered for one last look. Couples posed under the garlands. Children stamped their boots and begged for cocoa. It should have been ordinary. But Mara had the unsettled feeling of being watched by something that didn't blink. She wasn't supposed to be here. Her mother had told her to stay in. Her father had said the weather would turn. The older locals always said that when the mountains were angry, you didn't tempt them with bright lights and loud music. Mara came anyway because the snow had started falling wrong, too thick, too early, too determined. Like it had somewhere to be. And because, just before she left the house, she'd heard a sound that didn't belong to wind or holiday cheer. A note. Thin and aching, like a thread pulled taut across bone. Now she stood under the glow of the tree and tried to convince herself it was nothing. That she was tired. That she'd worked too many late shifts at the lodge. That living in a mountain town made people superstitious. Then the scream cracked through the square. It didn't rise and fall like panic usually did. It shattered, sudden, jagged, final, and for a heartbeat the entire town went silent as if the noise had stolen their ability to breathe. Head snapped toward the street leading in from the resort shops. Someone shouted, "Hey, over there!" Mara's stomach dropped before she even saw the source. Her body moved first, pushing through the crowd, shoulder-brushing coats and scarves and startled hands. The storm thickened, snow swirling sideways now, fast enough to blur faces. And through that blur, a figure stumbled into the square. A young woman, older than Mara by a few years, maybe, moving like she couldn't feel her legs, arms trembling as if she'd fought her way here. She wasn't dressed for the cold. No heavy coat. Just a thin sweater already crusted with frost. She fell to her knees beneath the Christmas tree. The crowd surged forward, voices colliding. "Is she drunk? Call an ambulance." "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Mara dropped beside her without thinking. The snow was instantly soaking through her jeans, cold biting into her skin, but she barely registered it. Her focus locked on the girl's face. Her lashes were white. Not from snowflakes, from ice. Frost clung to her cheekbones in delicate, branching patterns, like winter had decided to decorate her the way it decorated windows. The girl's eyes found Mara's. They were wide and glossy, frozen open in terror so pure it made Mara's throat tighten. The girl tried to speak. Her lips moved. No sound came out, just a puff of breath that crystallized midair. Mara leaned closer. "Hey," she said, voice low, steady, like calm could be shared if you pressed it into someone's hands. "Tell me what happened." The girl's mouth trembled. Then the note returned. Not in Mara's head this time, in the air. A melody slid through the wind, so soft most people wouldn't catch it, but Mara felt it like a fingertip on the back of her neck. It wasn't a tune you could hum. It wasn't joyful or sad. It was calling. Mara's pulse kicked hard. The girl's pupils blew wide as if she heard it too. Her fingers clawed at Mara's sleeve with surprising strength, nails scraping fabric. "Don't," the girl rasped, finally finding sound, a whisper that barely made it past her teeth. "It sings." And then the ice moved. Mara saw it, saw the frost patterns grow, crawling along the girl's throat in fine, pale filigree. Beautiful. Terrifying. Alive. The crowd gasped as if the whole town inhaled at once. Someone pushed in behind Mara. A man's voice, panicked. "She's freezing. She needs heat, someone get blankets." "Call the police," another voice cried, as if law could handcuff a blizzard. Mara's hands hovered over the girl's shoulders, afraid to touch skin that might break like glass. "Listen to me," Mara said. "Look at me. Stay with me." But the girl's gaze slid past her, past the lights and the faces, to the treeline beyond the square. As if she could see the mountain through the storm. As if she could see what was coming. Mara followed her stare. And that's when she noticed what she should have noticed the moment she stepped into the square. Not everyone in the crowd was reacting like a normal town. There were a few people, scattered, blending in with tourists and locals, who moved too smoothly, too deliberately. Their eyes weren't darting in confusion. They were scanning, calculating, communicating with looks instead of words. One of them, a woman with dark hair tucked under a hood, knelt across from Mara as if she belonged there. Her gloves were black leather. Her expression was controlled in the way people looked when they were trying not to show fear. Her gaze flicked once to the girl, then to Mara, then past Mara toward the mountain. And for the briefest second, something like guilt crossed her face. Not guilt like I should have done more. Guilt like we did this. The woman's attention snapped back to Mara, sharp and assessing. "Stand up," she said quietly, like an instruction. "Let the medics handle it." "I'm not leaving her," Mara shot back. The woman's jaw tightened. "You can't help her." Mara bristled. "And you can?" The woman hesitated, a blink too long. Then she reached forward, pressing two fingers to the girl's wrist. Her hand came away dusted in ice. The girl's breathing hitched. Her lips parted again, eyes glassy. "It's beautiful," she whispered, as if the melody had become something she could taste. "It's so." The words broke apart. The ice surged. A thin sheen spread across the girl's collarbone and jaw, catching the Christmas lights and throwing them back in glittering shards. The crowd screamed now, real screaming, messy and panicked, the kind that spread like wildfire. Mara's heart hammered so hard it hurt. The melody threaded through it all, unbothered by human noise. Mara looked at the woman again. "What is that?" she demanded. "What is happening to her?" The woman's eyes flicked toward the surrounding people, then back. "You need to stop talking." "Stop?" Mara couldn't breathe. She's freezing to death. The woman leaned closer, voice dropping even lower, a warning disguised as calm. You don't understand what you're looking at. Then explain it. Mara's voice rose despite herself. You know something? A man in a parka shoved his way forward. Move, he barked, holding a phone. I've got dispatch on the line. They're sending. He stopped mid-sentence, staring at the girl. The ice had reached her eyelashes. Her eyes were still open, still pleading, but her pupils no longer tracked movement. The frost wasn't just on her skin. It was claiming her. Holy, the man whispered. A second figure pushed into the circle, a broad-shouldered guy with a scarf pulled high. He didn't look at the girl first. He looked at the woman in the hood, as if checking for direction. She gave the smallest nod. He turned to the crowd. Back up, he commanded. Give her air. Who are you? Someone demanded. Emergency response, he began smoothly, too smoothly. Mara stared at him. There was no badge. No uniform. Just confidence. A coordinated lie. Mara's mind raced. The way they moved. The way they watched the mountain. The way they tried to control the story as fast as they controlled the crowd. You're with the lodge, Mara said, grasping for something that made sense. Security? The hooded woman's gaze snapped to Mara, hard now. Get up. Mara didn't. She shifted closer to the girl instead, protective, stubborn, furious. The girl's fingers were slackening, her grip fading. Mara caught her hand, cradling it between both of hers even though cold burned her palms. I heard it, Mara said, more to herself than anyone. The song. It's. Stop. The hooded woman grabbed Mara's wrist. Mara yanked back. No. Their eyes locked. In the woman's, Mara saw something that made her stomach turn, not cruelty, not indifference, but fear threaded through discipline. Like the woman was holding a door shut with her bare hands and praying it didn't splinter. Then the girl made a small sound. Not a scream. A sigh. Her head tipped slightly, and her eyes, still open, went still. The ice finished its work with a sound so faint Mara almost imagined it, a soft crackle, like a lake skinning over. The crowd recoiled. Someone sobbed. Someone vomited into the snow. Someone fell to their knees and crossed themselves. Mara's breath came out ragged. She stared at the girl's face, at the frozen lashes, the frost patterns, the impossible stillness. Mara choked. She's alive, she has to be. The hooded woman's voice was flat now. We're taking her. What? Mara whipped toward her. No, she needs a hospital. The broad-shouldered man stepped in, blocking Mara's view, and for a split second, just a flicker, Mara saw his eyes catch the light wrong, reflecting it like an animal's. A chill colder than the storm slid down Mara's spine. The hooded woman softened her expression by a fraction, the way someone might soften a blade before using it. Listen, she said. You're in shock. You're going to say things you can't take back. Mara's voice shook with rage. I'm not in shock. I heard it. I heard the singing, and then she. Enough, the woman snapped. Two more figures arrived, quiet, fast, moving with purpose. The crowd parted instinctively, as if something in them recognized authority even without uniforms. The hooded woman stood. What's your name? Mara, she said, breath steaming. Mara Elridge. The woman's eyes narrowed slightly, as if filing it away. Mara, she repeated, and there was something almost regretful in the way she said it. You didn't see anything you can explain. Mara stared up at her, incredulous. I saw her freeze in front of us. The woman's tone sharpened. Hypothermia can cause hallucinations. Mara blinked. What? You heard wind, the woman continued, voice steady, practiced. You heard people screaming. Your brain stitched it into a story because you were scared. Mara's mouth fell open. That's not. A hand touched Mara's shoulder, her mother, face white, eyes wide with terror and relief that Mara was alive. Mara, she whispered urgently, come on. Come home. Mara looked back at the girl, at the ice. Mom, she's. Come home, her mother repeated, firmer now, begging without tears. Please. The hooded woman addressed the crowd loudly, overriding the chaos. She's been drinking, she announced. She wandered off from the lodge. She's in severe shock. We're getting her help. Mara jerked her head up. She wasn't drinking. She said it was singing, she said. Her mother's grip tightened. Mara, she hissed, panic rising. Stop. The broad-shouldered man lifted the girl with careful arms, as if handling a sculpture. The ice didn't melt. It didn't break. It held. Like it belonged. A siren wailed somewhere, far off, too late. The hooded woman's gaze returned to Mara one last time. Go home, she said quietly. And don't repeat that song nonsense again. Mara's jaw trembled. Why? The woman didn't answer. She just turned away as her people moved the frozen girl out of the square, disappearing into the storm with the efficiency of a crew cleaning up a spill. Mara tried to follow. Her mother and father pulled her back, their hands desperate and shaking. The crowd started to disperse in fractured clusters, already rewriting the event out loud in the language of comfort. Freak accident. Alcohol. Exposure. Tragic, but explainable. Mara twisted in her parents' grip, eyes stinging with cold and rage. You heard it, she insisted, to anyone who would meet her gaze. The song, didn't you hear it? People looked away. Some with sympathy. Some with irritation. Some with that quick, cutting judgment reserved for girls who say impossible things. And above all of it, threading through the wind like a needle through cloth, the melody lingered, soft enough to deny, strong enough to haunt. Later, long after Mara was dragged home and the square was empty again, the Christmas tree kept blinking in the storm. Bright. Cheerful. Unbothered. As if nothing had happened. As if the town could decorate over the truth and call it healing. Mara lay awake that night, listening to the wind scrape the roof, replaying the girl's frozen eyes and the way the pack had moved like a single body. And she understood something that would shape the rest of her life. In Northwatch Ridge, truth wasn't about what you saw. It was about what everyone agreed to ignore. Mara carried that lesson like a stone in her pocket. In Northwatch Ridge, the truth wasn't about what you saw. It was about what everyone agreed to ignore. 3 years passed, and the town tried to forget the shape of that night. The lodge ran discounts. The mayor pushed festivals. They strung brighter lights over the square and called it resilience. But winter remembers. By the time the next hard season arrived, Northwatch Ridge was limping. The resort's bookings were thin. The slopes opened late. The staff turned over faster than the snow could cover the tracks. People whispered about bad luck and unsafe roads and that strange cold that seeps into your bones. No one said the word song. Mara did. She was stocking linens in the back hallway of the lodge when she heard it again, so faint she thought it was a pipe whining. She stilled, hand on a folded towel, listening. The note threaded through the building like breath through cracks. Thin. Aching. Certain. Mara's throat tightened. Her fingers went numb, not from cold, this hallway was heated, but from memory. She stepped into the service exit and pushed the door open. The storm hit her face with icy force. Snow spun in tight spirals, as if it had learned new ways to move. The mountain loomed beyond the lodge's roofline, dark under a low sky. And the melody was clearer out here. Closer. Mara stood on the steps until snow dusted her lashes, until her lungs burned with the effort of staying calm. She did not want to be right. She wanted, just once, to have been wrong. Inside, the lodge was full of forced cheer. Someone had started a carol playlist. Guests laughed near the fireplace. A child dragged a wolf plush across the rug and made it howl. Mara walked straight past them, into the manager's office, and said, "It's back." He stared at her like she'd spoken another language. "What is?" "The song," she said. "The one I told you about. The one nobody believed." His expression tightened in the way people's faces did when they were deciding whether to be kind or dismissive. "Mara." A shout cracked through the lobby. Not a scream, yet. More like a startled call. Someone had slipped. Someone had dropped a tray. Then another voice joined, sharper. "Has anyone seen Paige?" Mara's stomach dropped. It always started small. That was the cruelest part. It never arrived wearing horns. It came in on a whisper, and by the time people realized they should be afraid, they were already standing too close to the edge. She left the office before the manager finished his sentence. She moved through the lobby, eyes scanning faces, listening past the music. A woman's laugh. A door opening. Boots stamping. A gust of cold from the revolving entrance. And then, beneath it all, the melody, threading through the crowd, finding her like it had been waiting. "Paige," someone called again. A young employee. Blonde. Quiet. The type who apologized when you bumped into her. Mara had seen her earlier, carrying mugs of cocoa with red cheeks and a smile that looked borrowed. Mara pushed through the doors into the snow. The storm swallowed sound. Visibility dropped to a few yards. The resort's lights blurred into soft halos. Guests huddled near the entrance, unsure whether this was an inconvenience or a crisis. Mara didn't look for Paige's footprints first. She listened. The song drew her toward the side path that led behind the lodge, toward the woods where the pines stood thick and still. Snow crusted the branches, heavy enough to snap them. The air tasted metallic, as if the storm had scraped something sharp off the mountain and scattered it into the wind. "Mara," someone yelled behind her. "Where are you going?" She didn't answer. She followed the melody into the white. She found Paige at the edge of the tree lean, half kneeling in the snow like she'd tried to stand and couldn't remember how. Frost glittered along her collar. Her breath came in short clouds, each one thinner than the last. Mara's blood turned cold. Paige, Mara said, dropping beside her. Her voice stayed steady by force, like gripping a railing in a flood. Hey. Look at me. Paige's eyes flicked to Mara's face. Recognition bloomed, and then terror, blooming faster. It's, Paige whispered. Her teeth chattered so hard her words snapped. It's pretty. I didn't mean to. Mara heard it then, closer than she'd ever heard it before. Not just a single note. A line of melody, shaping itself like a hand reaching out. Mara's hands hovered over Paige's shoulders. She remembered the girl under the Christmas tree. The ice crawling like lace. The way the town had blinked and decided it was normal. No, Mara said, more to the storm than to Paige. Not again. Footsteps crunched behind her. Multiple. Fast, controlled. Not tourists. Mara looked up, and felt the same sick recognition from 3 years ago. They were back. Men and women in winter gear that didn't match, moving as a unit. Their faces were set, eyes bright in the snow. One of them carried a medical bag. Another had a radio clipped to his collar. And at the center of them, Cale Arden. He was taller than Mara remembered, or maybe the years had sharpened her memory into something smaller. His dark coat fell heavy to his knees. Snow clung to his shoulders without melting. His hair was slicked back, not a strand out of place despite the storm. His face was controlled to the point of cruelty. If fear lived in him, it lived behind locked doors. His gaze landed on Paige first, quick, assessing, then shifted to Mara. Something unreadable flickered there. Not warmth. Not apology. Recognition. Calculation. Mara Elridge, he said. He didn't ask it like a question. Mara's throat tightened. Alpha Arden. A few of his people exchanged looks. Someone muttered, "Lo, she's here." As if Mara was a fact they'd hoped to avoid. Cale crouched beside Paige without touching her, eyes tracking the frost along her skin. How long? I don't know, Mara said. Minutes. I heard the song and... Cale's jaw tightened, a subtle reaction that felt like confirmation more than surprise. One of his enforcers stepped forward. The hooded woman from 3 years ago wasn't with them, but Mara recognized the same kind of discipline. We'll take her, the enforcer said. No, Mara snapped, heat flaring through her fear. Not like last time. Cale's eyes lifted to hers. They were a cold gray, steady as stone. Last time, he said evenly, we kept panic from turning into a riot. You kept the truth from turning into anything at all. For the first time, something like irritation cracked his control. Not anger, impatience. As if arguing was an indulgence he couldn't afford. We don't have time, he said. Mara stared at Paige, at the frost advancing, at the way the melody thickened in the air like fog. Then listen, Mara said. It's the song. It's always the song. Cale didn't dismiss her. That was the first wrong thing. He didn't comfort her either. That was the second. Instead, he looked past her into the woods, as if he could see a path hidden by the storm. I know, he said. The words hit Mara like a shove. She swallowed hard. You knew? I know now, Cale corrected, and it was not an apology. It was a statement of alignment. Evidence had forced him to the same conclusion Mara had been screaming into the snow for years. His enforcers lifted Paige carefully. She didn't resist. Her eyes were fixed somewhere behind Mara's shoulder, dreamy with terror, as if the melody had wrapped around her throat. Cale stood, towering over Mara. Come. Mara didn't move. Where? To the pack hall, he said, as if it were inevitable. We need to talk. I'm not pack property. His gaze held hers, unblinking. No, he said. You're not. That should have sounded like respect. It didn't. It sounded like an assessment of what she could be used for. The pack hall sat on the ridge above town, a structure of dark stone and timber that looked older than the resort, older than the town's cheerful lies. Mara had never been invited inside. Tonight, the doors opened for her like a mouth. Heat hit her first, wood smoke and something faintly metallic, like old iron warmed by fire. The hall was full of people. Wolves in human skin. Mara felt their attention like pressure. They watched her enter beside Cale Arden as if she were a stain he'd dragged in on his boot. A woman stepped forward from the crowd with the smooth confidence of someone used to being obeyed. Her hair was pale as winter bark, braided tight. Her eyes were ice-bright, expression composed. Eloan Frostvale. Cale's second. Alpha, Eloan greeted, then looked at Mara as if she were inspecting a cracked dish. So it's her. Mara's spine went rigid. Hello to you too. Eloan's mouth curved, barely. I didn't realize we were collecting strays. Cale's voice cut through the room, quiet but absolute. Enough. Eloan tilted her head. Of course. We're all grateful for her sensitivity. The word landed like a slap. Mara looked around at the pack, faces turned away, eyes narrowed, whispers sliding through the room in a language meant to exclude her. She heard fragments, human, unstable, convenient. Useful. Cale walked to a long table and placed a folder down with precise care, as if setting a weapon on the surface. He opened it. Pushed it toward her. A contract, he said. Mara stared at the paper. Legal language. Pack seals. A line for her signature. Her name was printed in crisp black ink. Above it. Luna Consort Agreement. Mara's stomach turned. You're joking. Cale's expression didn't change. No. I'm human. I know. You don't even, Mara forced the word past her teeth. You don't even want me. A flicker. Not denial. The pack needs stability, Cale said, as if explaining a ledger. Alliances are fracturing. Rivals are circling. A human woman publicly named as Luna calms the town. It calms the lodge. It calms our borders. Mara's hands clenched. So I'm a prop. You're a shield, Eloan said smoothly from behind Cale. And if you're smart, you'll be grateful for the protection. Mara looked at Cale. And what do I get? His gaze met hers, steady and empty of comfort. Safety, he said. Resources. Access. And the truth. The truth. The word hooked into her ribs. Because she had lived 3 years starving for it, not the truth itself, but the simple human thing of being believed. Mara swallowed. And when this is over? Cale didn't hesitate. The contract ends. No warmth. No promise. No future implied. The rejection was there, subtle as frost, temporary. Useful. Dispensable. Mara's nails dug into her palm. So I sign away my life for your optics. You sign, Cale corrected, because you're the only one who hears it before it takes someone. Silence tightened the room. Even Alohan's smile thinned. Mara stared at the paper until the letters blurred. Then she looked up. If I sign this, she said, voice low, you listen to me. You don't rewrite me. You don't call me hysterical. You don't let your people treat me like a disease. Cale's gaze held hers. Agreed. Alohan's laugh was quiet. How noble. Mara took the pen anyway. Not because Cale Arden had offered her a home. Because the mountain was singing, and someone was missing, and if she didn't step into the lie, the truth would keep killing people. She signed. The days that followed were a slow lesson in what the contract really meant. They gave her a room in the pack hall, but it wasn't in the heart of it. It was along a colder corridor, near the exterior wall, where the wind found cracks and whispered through them at night. They gave her meals, but the tables shifted so there was always space around her, like rejection was a physical thing they could arrange. Pack members spoke about her more than they spoke to her. She can't even send a trail, someone murmured once, not quietly enough. Careful, another answered. She might cry and blame the snow. Alohan moved through it all like a blade wrapped in silk, never openly defying Cale, never offering Mara open violence, just constant, careful undermining. A redirected order. A forgotten message. A training session scheduled accidentally when Mara was needed elsewhere. And always that smile that said, you're here because the Alpha is desperate. Don't mistake that for belonging. Mara endured it the way she'd endured the town's dismissal, by keeping her eyes on what mattered. The song. It came more often now. Sometimes so faint she thought she imagined it, until the air sharpened and the frost patterns appeared like delicate scars on tree bark. Cale took her into the forest with an escort after the third disappearance, a tourist who'd wandered from the lodge and never returned. They found him 2 days later. Not a body. A statue. He stood among the pines with his hands lifted as if he'd been calling for help, face contorted in confusion, eyes open under a sheet of ice so clear it looked like glass. Snow had dusted his shoulders as if the mountain had decided to decorate its work. Mara's stomach lurched. She turned away too late. Cale didn't move. His face remained controlled, but his throat worked once, swallowing something. One of his enforcers cursed under his breath. Mara forced herself to look again. The ice on the man's skin wasn't random. It had shape. Pattern. Symbols. They spiraled along his arms like frost-etched runes. Mara knelt, leaning close. This is intentional. Cale crouched beside her. The closeness was sudden, heavy with his presence, his heat a strange contrast against the cold air. What do you see? He asked. Mara traced a pattern with her gaze, not touching. It's like a language. Cale's eyes narrowed, following her focus. We found marks like this before, he admitted, and the admission was a quiet crack in the wall between them. Before. So it had happened more than once. And they'd buried it each time. Mara's jaw tightened. And you still let people come here? Cale's voice was flat. We didn't know what it was. You knew enough to silence me. His gaze flicked to hers, sharp. For a second, something lived in his eyes, regret, maybe, or something colder, acknowledgement that he'd made the wrong calculation. Then he looked away. We need to understand it now. They followed the frost patterns deeper into the trees until Cale's boot slipped on hidden ice. He caught himself, but not before his hand slammed against a jagged rock beneath the snow. Blood spattered white. Cale hissed, the sound clipped like he'd cut it off. Mara's hands moved before her mind finished deciding. Sit, she said, and when he didn't immediately obey, she added, Alpha or not, you're bleeding. Cale's mouth tightened, but he sat on a fallen log, posture rigid as if pain was something he refused to acknowledge. Mara pulled a cloth from her pocket, linen, stolen from her lodge habits, and wrapped his hand. His skin was warm under her fingers. Human warm. It startled her. Across the clearing, a low growl rolled through the trees. Mara froze. A shape moved between the pines. Large. Silent. Gray-white for blending into the storm. Cale's wolf. Not shifted halfway. Not monstrous. Just, there, fully wolf, eyes like winter sky, watching Mara with a stillness that made her breath catch. Cale didn't look back. He didn't need to. He won't hurt you, he said. Mara kept her gaze on the wolf. That's not what I'm worried about. The wolf stepped closer, snow whispering under its paws. It stopped a few feet away and lowered its head slightly, sniffing the air. Mara didn't move. She let the wolf decide. A slow exhale left the animal. Its ears flicked. It looked at Mara as if weighing something, then, impossibly, it sat. Guarded. Present. Trust. Mara finished tying the cloth around Cale's hand. Her fingers brushed his wrist. She felt the pulse there, steady, controlled. Your wolf seems to like me, she said quietly. Cale's voice came even lower. He trusts what I don't. Mara's chest tightened at that, not because it was tender, but because it was honest in the way Cale rarely allowed himself to be. She looked at him then. Really looked. Cale Arden sat with blood on his knuckles and snow caught in his lashes, face carved into discipline, eyes fixed on the dark line of the mountain as if staring at it hard enough could make it blink first. Alone in a room full of people. A mirror. Mara heard her own thought like a whisper, it isn't hunting randomly. Something about him fit the pattern. That night, they brought in an old book, pack records bound in cracked leather, pages filled with sketches of symbols and stories the town had never been allowed to hear. Mara sat at the long table while pack members spoke around her, not to her, voices low and proprietary. Alolan stood at Cale's shoulder, pointing to a page. Icewitch folklore, she said dismissively. Human nonsense. Mara leaned in. The drawings weren't nonsense. They were accurate. The same spirals. The same branching marks. A name repeated in older script, half worn away by time and handling. Mara traced the ink with her eyes. This isn't a witch. Alolan's gaze slid to her. And you'd know? Mara's voice stayed steady. It's not feeding on blood or flesh. It's freezing people where they stand. Preserving them. Like it wants them to stay. The table went quiet. Cale's gaze lifted. Say it again. Mara swallowed. It isn't a predator, she said, and felt the truth settle in her bones with terrifying clarity. It's reaching. A sound came from somewhere deeper in the hall, wood creaking, as if the building itself shifted. Cale stared at the symbols, then at his wounded hand, then at the window where snow pressed against the glass like a living thing. "Why now?" he murmured, not to anyone. "Why me?" The melody answered him. Not faint this time. Clear. Close. Cale's head snapped toward the sound like a compass needle. Mara's heart slammed against her ribs. "Cale." He stood so fast his chair scraped. His expression went distant, as if a part of him had moved somewhere else already. The wolf rose in the shadows behind him, ears pricked. Eloan grabbed his arm. "Alpha, don't. Send the trackers." Cale pulled free with a sharpness that silenced her. His eyes were fixed beyond the walls, beyond the town, beyond the storm. As if something had spoken his name in a language only loneliness understood. Mara stepped toward him. "It's calling you." Cale's jaw flexed once. "I need to see it." "You need to not go alone," Mara snapped. Cale's gaze flicked to her, and for a second the mask slipped enough for Mara to see what lived beneath. Not fear. Not doubt. A terrible, disciplined willingness to be taken if it meant ending this. "You signed to help," he said, voice low. "This is how." Then he turned and strode into the night. The wolf followed without hesitation, a pale shadow slipping through the door. Mara ran after him, but by the time she hit the steps the storm had thickened into a wall. Snow swallowed the path within seconds. The melody threaded through the wind like a ribbon being pulled into the trees. "Cale," she shouted, voice ripped apart by the blizzard. "Cale, stop." No answer. Only the song, leading upward, into the mountain. Mara stood in the white, breath burning, and realized with a cold certainty that made her knees weaken. The thing in the storm hadn't returned for tourists. It hadn't returned for the town. It had returned for the Alpha who thought he could keep control of everything, including the parts of himself that were already frozen. And now Cale Arden was gone. Cale Arden vanished into the storm like the mountain had swallowed him whole. For a few minutes, Mara stood on the pack hall steps with snow biting her cheeks and the song threading through the air like a leash. The guards behind her shouted. Someone grabbed her arm. Eloan's voice cut sharp through the chaos, orders, names, routes. Mara didn't listen. Because the melody wasn't calling them. It was calling him. And if Cale had followed it the way she'd seen in his eyes, like a man stepping willingly into a grave, then no pack tracker in the world was going to find him in time. Mara pulled free. She didn't take a coat. She didn't take a lantern. She took only what she'd carried for years, the ability to hear what others refused to hear, and the stubbornness to walk toward it anyway. The forest met her like a warning. Snow spun in tight circles around her ankles as if deciding whether to trip her. Wind pressed against her shoulders, pushing her back, testing her. The pines creaked with a sound like old bones shifting. The mountain noticed her. That was the first time Mara understood the difference between weather and will. The song drew her upward along a narrow trail that should have been buried. Frost patterns gleamed on rocks like pale writing. Branches bent away from her path as if the storm didn't want to touch her skin. The air sharpened the higher she climbed, every breath tasting of iron and ice. Somewhere ahead, a wolf howled, one long, strained sound that broke into the wind and vanished. Mara quickened her pace until her lungs burned. The melody grew clearer. And with it came a memory, a girl under a Christmas tree, lashes white with ice. A town turning its face away. A pack hall offering her a title like a muzzle. Useful. Temporary. Expendable. Mara's boots slipped on glazed stone. She caught herself on a tree trunk crusted with frost and felt something pulse under her palm, like the mountain's heartbeat. "Fine," she whispered into the storm. "I'm coming." The song answered, soft and satisfied. The entrance to the glacial hollow wasn't marked by anything dramatic. No carved gate. No warning sign. Just a fissure in the mountainside, half hidden behind snowdrifts, where the wind didn't blow. Mara stepped into it and the world changed. The storm fell away as if someone had shut a door. Silence pressed close, thick and cold. The air inside was so clear it stung. Her breath floated in front of her like a pale ghost and didn't drift far. Ice walls rose around her, smooth as glass in some places, jagged as teeth in others. Light seeped through the frozen rock in a dim blue wash, making everything look submerged. And the song? The song was everywhere now. Not loud. Never loud. But it filled the cavern the way water fills a crack, patient, relentless, impossible to ignore. Mara moved deeper, hand trailing along the wall. Her fingertips brushed frost patterns that weren't random, spirals, branching lines, symbols repeating with the precision of a ritual. The floor sloped downward into a wide chamber. At the center of it stood Cale Arden. He was upright, as if he'd stopped mid-step. Ice encased him from boots to shoulders, a crystalline shell that caught the blue light and scattered it like stars. His eyes were open. Alive. Aware. Unreachable. Mara's chest seized. "Cale," she breathed, voice cracking in the cold. His gaze shifted, barely. A minute movement, like someone behind thick glass trying to signal. Mara stumbled forward and dropped to her knees in front of him. The ice radiated cold so deep it felt older than time. She lifted her hand, then stopped inches from the frozen surface. Touching him felt like breaking him. "I came," she whispered, throat tight. "I'm here." The song curled around them, almost tender. Mara looked over her shoulder. The chamber was empty. Then she realized the emptiness had an edge. Someone was there, just outside her vision, like a figure reflected in ice she didn't dare turn toward. The temperature dropped again. Mara slowly rose. "I know you're here," she said into the dim blue. The song shifted, one note bending, as if listening. And then the frost nymph stepped from the shadows. She didn't move like a predator. She moved like drifting snow given a spine. Her hair was dark, long, threaded with ice crystals that chimed softly when she turned her head. Her skin held the pale sheen of moonlight on frozen lakes. Her eyes were the color of winter sky, beautiful and empty in the way deep water is empty. A red ribbon was tied through her hair, a small, human thing against all that cold. She looked at Cale first. Not hunger. Not triumph. Longing. Then her gaze slid to Mara. And Mara felt it, immediately, unmistakably. Recognition. Not of a face. Of a feeling. The nymph's expression didn't sharpen with threat. It softened, almost imperceptibly, like a hand unclenching. "You hear me," the nymph said. Her voice wasn't spoken aloud so much as placed inside Mara's mind, gentle, aching, unbearably intimate. Mara's mouth went dry. "Yes." The nymph tilted her head, studying Mara the way a person studies a wound they can't stop touching. "They did not believe you." Mara's breath hitched. The nymph stepped closer, and the ice under her feet didn't crack. It welcomed her. "You were left outside," she murmured. "Unchosen." A laugh tried to claw its way out of Mara's throat and failed. "You're not supposed to know that." The nymph's gaze flicked to Kale's frozen face. "He is alone inside himself," she said, and the words trembled with yearning. "Like me." Mara's hands curled into fists. "So you took him." "I reached," the nymph whispered, and a sorrow so old it felt heavy as stone pressed against Mara's ribs. "I only reach. And everything I touch becomes still." Mara swallowed hard. "You're freezing people." The nymph's eyes dimmed. "So they do not leave." The cruelty of it hit Mara like a slap, not cruelty from malice, but cruelty from need. A starving thing grasping for warmth and finding only ice. Mara looked back at Kale. His eyes followed her, pleading without words. She turned to the nymph again, heart pounding. "He didn't choose you." The nymph's lips parted slightly, as if the concept of choice was a language she'd never learned. "He belongs," she said softly. "He fits." Mara's voice shook. "He belongs to himself." The nymph stared at Mara for a long moment. Then she lifted her hand, slowly, carefully, toward Mara's face. Mara didn't flinch. Because she saw the hesitation there, trembling like a candle flame. The nymph didn't want to hurt her. She was afraid of her own touch. The nymph's fingers stopped a breath away from Mara's cheek, and frost bloomed in the air between them, beautiful, lethal. Mara spoke fast, voice raw. "Don't." The nymph's hand lowered. Mara exhaled, shaky. "I understand," she said, surprising herself with the truth of it. "I know what it's like to reach for something and be told you don't deserve it." The nymph's eyes widened slightly. Mara took a step forward into the cold. "I know what it's like to be ignored when you're telling the truth. To have your words rewritten. To be used when you're convenient." Her voice thickened. "To be given a title that doesn't mean belonging." Behind her, Kale's gaze tightened, as if hearing the words cost him. Mara kept going anyway. "I was rejected before I ever had anything to lose," she whispered. "So don't pretend you're the only one who knows loneliness." The song faltered. Just for a beat. The nymph's expression shifted, pain and curiosity braided together. "You are not reaching," she murmured. "You stand. Even when you are left." Mara's throat burned. "Because I had to." The air shimmered. A new presence entered the chamber, not announced by footsteps, but by the sensation of something ancient opening its eyes. The blue light deepened. Symbols along the walls flared pale and bright. A man appeared at the far edge of the chamber as if stepping out of the ice itself. He wore a long coat dark as midnight, stitched with silver thread that mirrored the frost patterns. His hair was white, his face ageless, his eyes a calm that didn't belong to human years. Aurelian the Binder. Mara didn't know his name, but the moment she saw him, she knew what he was, the keeper of bargains, the thing Pax prayed for, never noticed them. He looked at Mara with mild interest, like she was a story he'd heard before in different shapes. Then he looked at the frost nymph with something like pity. "You found your mirror," Aurelian said to the nymph, voice echoing softly in the ice. "And you reached, as you always do." The nymph's gaze flicked toward him. "I did not mean to break him." "You never do," Aurelian replied. Intent does not soften consequence. Mara swallowed. Can you free him? Aurelian's eyes settled on Mara. I can, he said. But nothing breaks without cost. Mara felt the weight of those words settle into her bones. What cost? Aurelian's mouth curved faintly. You signed a contract to be Luna, he said, as if tasting the irony. A title humans crave when they want to be chosen by something powerful. Mara's jaw tightened. I didn't crave the title. You craved being believed, Aurelian finished, gently. Being wanted. Being kept. Mara went still. Aurelian lifted a hand. The air glittered. For a heartbeat, Mara saw a vision, herself standing beside Kale at the head of the pack hall, a bond burning bright under her skin, wolves bowing, alone forced to swallow her disdain. Power. Status. Transformation. A place carved into the world that no one could deny. The vision was warm in a way Mara had never felt in her life. It made her want to cry. Aurelian watched her, unblinking. I can give you that, he said softly. I can make the contract real. Kale's eyes flared, panic and hope tangled together. Mara's hands trembled. Then she looked at the frost nymph. The nymph stood rigid, terrified of her own longing, as if the only way she knew to keep someone was to turn them into ice. Her eyes stayed fixed on Kale like he was the first thing in centuries that felt like home. And Mara understood. This wasn't about monsters and heroes. This was about hunger. Mara exhaled slowly. No, she said. Aurelian blinked once, mildly surprised. No? Mara's voice steadied, hardening into something simple. I don't want power that comes from taking, she said. And I don't want love that's paid for with magic. Aurelian's gaze sharpened. Then what do you want, Mara Elridge? Mara looked at Kale, at the ice holding him alive, at the man who had never offered her warmth, only necessity. Then she looked at the nymph. I want this to end, Mara said. Aurelian's eyes flicked toward the nymph. She cannot stop reaching. Then give her something else to reach for, Mara whispered. Someone else who won't break when she touches them. The cavern fell utterly still. The song trembled. Aurelian's expression softened by a fraction. Companions, he murmured. Mara nodded. Others like her, she said, voice shaking with the weight of it. Not humans. Not wolves. Frost beings who can share what she is without shattering. The nymph's eyes widened, the first hint of hope cracking through her devastating beauty. Aurelian's gaze returned to Mara. And the price? Mara swallowed hard. She already knew. Take the bond, she said quietly. Any chance of him choosing me. Any future where that contract becomes real. Kale's eyes flared again, this time with something like horror. Mara didn't look away. Aurelian's voice was gentle, almost kind. You will never be Luna, he said. Not in truth. Not in name. You will leave here unclaimed. Unrewarded. Mara's throat burned. I know. You will not be remembered as his mate, Aurelian continued. You will not be held up as the pack's miracle. You will be a footnote. Mara closed her eyes for one heartbeat. Then she opened them and met Aurelian's stare. Then let me be a footnote that ends the killing. Aurelian held her gaze a long time. Then he nodded once. Agreed. The symbols on the cavern walls ignited in pale blue light. The song rose, not louder, but fuller, as if voices were joining from beyond the ice. The air split with a sound like crystal singing. And in the far corners of the chamber, shapes began to form, figures stepping out of frost the way breath steps out of lungs. More nymphs. More winter-made beings, their eyes bright, their presence soft as falling snow. The frost nymph gasped, a sound like joy she didn't recognize. She turned toward them, hesitant, trembling, and for the first time, she didn't reach with desperation. She reached with wonder. The ice around Cale cracked. Mara lunged forward instinctively as shards fell away like broken glass. Cale collapsed, hard, heavy, suddenly human again, and Mara caught him, his weight slamming into her arms. He was warm. Alive. His breath hitched in a violent gasp, as if he'd been drowning and had finally broken the surface. Mara held him for one stunned heartbeat. The song eased, becoming something softer as the frost beings gathered around the nymph, their voices weaving together, harmonizing with hers. Aurelian watched it like a man closing a book. Then he looked down at Mara. The warmth of the earlier vision was gone. In its place was a quiet emptiness where hope used to ache. Aurelian spoke one last time, voice echoing faintly, "You chose without being chosen." And then he was gone, dissolving into the blue light as if he'd never stood there at all. They returned to Northwatch Ridge just before dawn. The storm thinned as if exhausted. The pack found them near the edge of town, where the snow drifted high against the road. Wolves in human forms surged forward, voices shouting Cale's name. Eloan reached him first, hands on his shoulders, her face an open mask of relief. Alpha. Cale's gaze was unfocused at first, like a man waking from a nightmare. Then it snapped to Mara. Something in his eyes shifted, regret, gratitude, something raw he didn't know how to hold. The pack didn't look at Mara like a savior. They looked at her like an accident standing too close to their alpha. By the time they reached the square, the Christmas tree lights were still blinking, stubborn as ever, casting color onto the snow. Someone began to cry. Someone laughed shakily. The tension cracked into celebration the way ice cracks in spring, loud, sudden, relieved. "They're safe," someone shouted. "Cale is back." Mara stood at the edge of the crowd, watching joy ripple through bodies that had never offered her warmth. Cale pushed through the cluster and stopped in front of her. Snow clung to his hair. His eyes were still haunted, but now they held her with a painful steadiness. "Mara," he said, voice rough. "I." She lifted a hand. Not to touch him. To stop him. Cale froze. Behind him, Eloan watched with narrowed eyes, the satisfaction of survival already sharpening into politics. Mara's throat tightened. She could feel the absence in her chest where hope had lived, quiet, clean, final. "You don't owe me words," she said softly. "And I don't want them if they're only guilt." Cale's jaw flexed. "You saved me." Mara's mouth curved, faint and humorless. "I saved the town," she corrected. "I saved the people you couldn't afford to lose." Cale's eyes darkened. "That's not." Mara stepped back, snow crunching under her boot. "It's exactly what it is." His gaze flicked to the pack, to Eloan, to the hall waiting to swallow him back into duty. When he looked at Mara again, the apology in his eyes was real. But it was late. "I could make it right," he said, and the words sounded like a man bargaining with fate. Mara shook her head. No, she whispered. That's the point. Cale's hand lifted slightly, as if he wanted to reach. As if he wanted to claim the space between them. He didn't. Whether from restraint or respect, Mara couldn't tell. And she realized, with a strange calm, that it didn't matter. She turned away from the Christmas lights, away from the square, away from the pack that would always see her as a tool they'd used and a problem they'd endured. Snow fell gently now, soft and harmless, as if the mountain had never screamed. Mara walked into it anyway. Unclaimed. Unbound. Undefeated. And behind her, the town kept celebrating under the blinking tree, decorating over the truth the way it always had, while Mara Elridge chose herself, at last, without waiting for anyone else to choose her first. If this story caught your attention, subscribe and join us for the next chapter.